Hello, 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 and welcome to hello, and welcome to hello, and welcome to Pop Cartoon couple, coming to you from the Ala Valley, with concern and enthusiasm. I couldn't help but notice a lot of mouse discourse this last couple weeks. It's very exciting as a comics cartoon nerd, and as as a religious fundamentalist. It was very challenging as a kid because there was so much in it about what it's like to be people and was like to be people. And the argument for art as it is you get to hear and see a little of how it really is, as opposed to a somehow acceptable readapted version, which is kind of what pop is, right? Pop, by definition, isn't real even when it is. That's not how Napoleon was. That's not how Julius Caesar was. That's not how Superman is. And sometimes it feels like an adaptation of a sense of how something is or should be crosses over better. Sometimes something very new is introduced. And I think this is the secret of the two mems and the two fishes of Adar. Not that we're so far into Aquarius that it's really Pisces, but Aquarius is so much wrapped around Pisces, so much so that the first star in it leads right into the water carrier in the heavens is pouring out water into the aqua piscinis directly to the Pisces alpha and beta, the two little Pisces, Fishees, that come and go. And it's early for that, which is why we have two of them, to catch us up a little bit. Like physically, in many ways, it's nice just to have a language, a way for bridging the sun and the moon calendarically, because we can't help but appreciate both, can't help but notice the moon, can't help but notice the sun. And as much as a calendar aspires to integrate those two things, it sort of turns into a very wide spiral almanac of when the crossovers start to be, And those aren't always quite as relevant as sort of the short sense of the thing. But there is a part of the thing that is really bound up in the moon cycle, kind of, or not. Maybe that we aspire to bind in the moon cycle, or maybe that the moon cycle gives us time to notice and be prepared for. But the two Adars split into the real Adar, which is coming, and the first Adar, which is nigh, and crosses over back into now, which is still so Aquarius because the rain is still coming down so hard. I want to posit something very elemental, that Aquarius is defined by the rains and the cold and the snow and the solstice, as opposed to Leo. This is one of the more obvious things a person could say, but especially as far as the sort of chariot schemata of bull, lion, eagle, angel / person, because people are angels. And this is part of the humanizing, congealing element in Aquarius and in the receiving of the bucket, in the receiving of the mission, but the cold is the mission that creates angels. Keep in mind, angels, in order to be constructed, are first dipped into cold water and thus given their names and existence. And this is the fortification of angels. I mean, hot water. and then cold water for a second in order to be re-realized. Even in their reassociation traditionally, let's say like how stable is an angel, right? As much as the mission of an angel is over an infinitely long period of time, like, for as long as there's light, let's say, or heat or love, just as long as that's the mission that Care Bear endures in heaven, Care Bearing away, ostensibly. But as much as the mission is a short-term mission, it's over in the wash. And traditionally, in order to remove the stain of emission and move on to some other thing within the thing, it's cold water, the cold water in the highest heaven. It's really chilly up there, and they keep a little bit of water on top, as opposed to the nature of water, which is really to come down. And so, there's a famous thing in the Sefer Bahir that there's two mems, the open mem and the closed mem. This is a famous thing in the Hebrew language. There's 5 letters in the Hebrew language that there's the normal version. Mm, mm, ts, p, mm, mm, ts, p, that they look a certain normal way at the beginning, the real way, and different at the end. Mm, mm, tss, and it's just like differently with the whole kind of flowery long thing. Challenge. My name has one. Yosef has like a sort of, even as a kid, I could never felt like I was doing it right. The little that comes down the long cane of the in my safe. It's not Yosef, it's my safe. Aquarius, in these 4 extremes, Tim Leary and Robert Anton Wilson identify him with friendly weakness, as we've discussed, supportiveness, the angel, and this is why he's so I want to say vulnerable in the service, the full bucket versus the empty bucket. Mouse can't really be adapted to cartoons, can it? Could it? It's a question how much Fievel, An American Tale, was an attempt to sort of kind of try. And alhamdulillah, we all love Fievel. But it's a very different story. Mouse is also strange to me as a kid because suddenly comics were part of the school curriculum. It was the first thing to be taken seriously in that way. And in many ways, in schools, we did experience it as a Trojan horse because it also sort of elaborated the nature of relationships happening in Poland. Instead of just being like a sort of martyr class of people who just, the 6 million, everyone's story is so intimate. There is so much happening. And it's long been compared to Watchmen in terms of being from a similar moment of crossover gravitas, where the pop medium was able to reach back and become serious literature. And of course, you had this before. You can't say that anything Will Eisner did wasn't serious literature. Can't say that, Robert Crumb isn't serious literature. I mean, you could try. But I guess those didn't cross over. Those were all, different distribution mechanisms than the regular bookstore. And Mouse really did seem to Trojan horse comics as literature. And I always was a little frustrated by it for that reason, because I loved comics so much and thought Mouse was just so dark and so bitter, even the long-term impact. As a grown-up, of course, the bitterness of Mouse is so much more appreciated and shocking still. But part of the problem is that in the season is rising up the general concern from the cold water and from the excess starts the fear cycle, where we start to notice what we're nervous about because we're cold and wet, and suddenly that wakes us up. And suddenly, this is part of the solidification of an angel from fire into cold driven purpose, like a sword. And from that comes noticing what's worth worrying about. So there's mold, and there's just every war hanging over the horizon, because the war season is usually in March, and the beginning of being worried and nervous and sensitive is the beginning of insisting the controls that either lead to or prevent a conflict, depending on, whatever it is things depend on. And this is so much the mystery of the vulnerability of the first Adar, in the unwieldiness before pattern, where the sense of unrightness and unbalance is deeply felt. In the Hebrew calendar, the months are very identified with the sign that the astrology has pretty close to them. Deeply, the holidays are very deeply bound up in the moon cycle, as well as the sun narrative. It's almost like a fake promise, and it goes back to God's original sin. Do you guys know the story? God made the world. And at first, everything was still God. And there was no distance at all, except just a little bit of space and distance where God made it like there should be a little something that is not God, so I can share. And right away, it's a little unclear which of those two little things is God. And it's likened to the sun and the moon, a dialogue between the sun and the moon. Because you have this even in the Bible. Listen, I'm sure some stuff from Kabbalah is just made up, but like this is from the Bible, where it says the two great lights. On the days of creation, first there's the two great lights, the sun and the moon. Doesn't differentiate between them. And just says one is over each one. But it calls them the two great lights. And they say the very first thing that happened almost, maybe very early, the first thing that happened, might have happened later also. Because it's spoken about in terms of Kud Shebrichu and the moon, the Levana. But everyone knows Kud Shebrichu is the sun, and Malchus is the Levana. Everyone knows that, The original Malchut, let's say the original Shechina, which is the original purpose of creation, the original little distance dot that is the other that I love, that I create for, that I am for, that I am defined in the context of and only appreciated in the context of. They say the angels, which somehow already existed, weren't sure which was which, for a second. And they talk about like a dialogue, just for a second between them, where they're sharing one crown. And the moon, the Livana, says, hey, we can't both share one crown, me and the sun, me and you. So Kuchibrichu says, okay. Make yourself smaller. And naturally the moon is very offended. It's not right that I should be smaller. Just because I noticed the problem, just because I noticed it, I should be smaller. But she does, she takes responsibility for it, but it's not okay. And there's a few things that the God offers in order to make it okay. All the Jewish holidays, very lunar. No, she's like very offended. That's like, what is it? It's not enough. Doesn't make it okay. Okay. Stars. All of them. All the stars. Just all the stars just to back you up. You get the whole star system. It's very deep. Everyone's going to build their mythologies around you. You might be in conflict with some city stuff, but we'll deal with that later on. It's like thank you. The stars were there when I got there anyway. No, I don't know. It's not enough. And so very famously, Hashem, Yud Kevav Ke Adonai Tzivaot, the Deucalion, is having a sin offering offered for him in the Holy Temple. There's an extra one every Rosh Chodesh. You all know the story. But these are also the split of the two fish. I'm going to read a piece with you right now about angel names, social conflicts, letters, specifically the ones in Matzepach. And we're going to start with the letter Kuf. Or should I say the letter Kaf? Shok. Mamre Chodesh Adar, Ma'odale, Chodesh Dibar Minyan Elyon, Chodesh Seruv Hashem Nekbar Meir Mlo, and Yanim Avurim B'Sefer Yitzira. Here's talking from the context of the meaning of what it's about, the moon, Adar, which is Pisces, but not this Adar, and not this Pisces. Because there's two, similar to the full bucket and empty bucket of Aquarius. I'm going to read one little tiny small one for Shvat about the trees, just to introduce a concept here. It's the Gimel from the last one from the Shvat. Ein mashkadav imrei chadesh nemuzav amar betul lechol siman tabin inyan tu b'Shvat kasher tiponim sham tabin gam ken tam lama amar tana b'lashon yachid ilan begematria vaya anoni yuhda shilim. There's a bipolarity that's also part of the entire concept of Cancer and Leo, which, because they have a weird thing, they're ruled by the moon and the sun. All the other signs are ruled by the main 5 planets, you know? And this is part of the 7 breaking into the 12, that the sun and the moon are very different from the other 5. And there's a recurring theme in a lot of the agriculture and language in the Hebrew stuff. 7 that are actually 5, because 2 of them are also 5. Or not even at all. Or included, and. Connects it to the singular word tree and not trees. Because this is a classic example. In the Garden of Eden, how many trees are there? I'm sure there's infinite, but like there's one tree. There's just one tree. It's both things. It makes everything okay. It makes everything a problem. And mostly they make everything okay. The tree of life, as much as it's also the tree of knowledge, the tree of knowledge, part of it still gets to come with some degree of tree of life. You know, you do get to live. You do get to know. And what is life but to know? Here it comes. Hey, hey, why? Wow. The order of the letters for this month is hey, hey, yud, and then wow. Hey, hey, yud, and then wow. This is very different from the month before. And it comes out from the Pasuk Misefei Tevot, Ira Belashurka B'nei Atonu. awaken and to shrook, children of the donkey. בספר צייה, עיין הדבר הזה וכמה עניינים מכירה עליי טובה עלינו. Sometimes I like to try to explain things in the most basic way before going forwards, and sometimes it's a promise that if I don't, it'll actually make more sense. עירה לשורקה בני אותנו. בספר יצירה המליך עוד קוף בשוק. In the Sefer Yetzirah, there's a kuf crowned onto the calf. The kasha loketer, and put in a crown. This letter, kuf, gets crowned on the calf. Vitzar bodagim ba'olam, and Pisces in the world. The Adar b'shana, and Adar in the year. The Tchol b'nefesh, and the gallbladder in the body. Zachar nekeva, masculine and feminine. That old chestnut. Al kenine odhei, botzav yetzeres silchor sichon, ken ot yot sheba alebes him golem echad. So here's the thing about the letter kuf. They're all sort of one shape together, but each letter is so different. Kuf is shaped a lot like a hay, except that the hay part is so small. It's just a little one with the sort of dalid hanging over it, as opposed to a kuf, which is so long, breaks through the border at the bottom of the cursor of the page, goes down underneath, and behold, and hey is the letter from Nisan, which we started with at the beginning of things. The ka gives way to a ha, from which it came. And this is the end of the cycle. Pisces is traditionally the 12th moon, and we're not there yet. And there's 13 of them this year. One of those years where there's 13 of them. And the first one, let's be honest, is more of a makeup for the thing that's missing in the last one. It's been observed by some friends this last year that maybe Tu B'Shvat didn't happen, and that is still coming. Or that it came just now, and the whole thing is to catch things before the things.